Kufayin, chapter 170, Maimed Vaschanon. Page Shin Mem Gimel, 343. So I'll start to do that. We're up to here is basically the chibur, the connection between Gvul and Bli Gvul, which is the general theme that the Rebbe Rashab is addressing. But specifically, he began first with the Mamutza of Atzilus. Mamutza of Atzilus, or the Kav, which is Oir. So it's Davuk to the Moir, which means it represents Bli Gvul basically, because it's connected to the Eir Ein Sof. It's how Eir Ein Sof Shir Atzmei, so-called, created within himself a space for Gvul, but it's still Oir. On the other hand, it's Eir HaGvul, because according to the Shitta here, that the Kav is made up, it has within it some form of Gvul, even though it's Poshet, even though it's not recognizable, but it's a form of Gvul. And that's the Mamutza, which he compares, that says Tada also is similar to that Mamutza. That's the first Mamutza. What we're up to now is the second Mamutza, the Mamutza of Ak, which he also compares to Tada. Remember, both are Tada, because if you look back, you'll see the chapter. So Tada now is Ak, Chochma da Ak. And the Ak Mamutza is different because the Ak Mamutza, as he puts it, is really Mitzad the Nevroim, Mitzad the Yisavos. Ak is, because he asked the first question, Ak is Odom de Bria. As Bria, it cannot be representing Elikus like Atzilus does. So it's not the same type of intermediary. So what's the intermediary of Ak? So it's the category of Klal and Prat. That Ak is the entire scope, the entire vision of the beginning of time till the end of time, as he spoke about the beginning of all space. So Ak is the klal that's still not defined in details, but it's like machshava kedum da'ak that kill all ishtalshlus. And that's the mamutza. The mamutza between the big picture, so to speak, and how it comes down later into the specifics in each elam in each world.
This is generally
but he adds that Ak also has primius Ak, and it's a primius Ak, it does have a taste of Ein Sof. It does add that element. So it's not completely, doesn't have an Ein Sof element in it, but it's not comparable to the so-called Atzilus the Klolos type of Mamutza.
There's a pinimis related to the Chelik El-Kai that every year does.
He doesn't really, he says it's Adam, it's Adam. Ak is Adam, it's the Patzuf of Adam, so it's essentially Ak is like when you say God created himself, as a human being in the image, Salmenu Kudmusenu, what's the quintessential so-called primordial man is Ak. That is Ak. Ak is when it says in the Torah that Hashem created something b'tselem v'dmus in its purest form. That's Ak. But in that context, it's the supernal. It's on a supernal stage. It's not yet an individual like us. It's more of the concept, so to speak, of all of existence. So if you were to say existence, take it all the way to the end, to the biggest picture, that's Ak. Once you go beyond Ak, you're already entering the world of Oir and Bli Gvul, and so on. So Ak is really the so-called at the highest level within existence. And that's the common problem. Now what he's going to do in this Pei Kufayin is discuss how this is now also in Tada. Because remember, Tada and Eir are constantly equated with each other. So Atzilus is Atzilus. But the bottom line is that we need all these Mamutzaim. And he's going to speak about more Mamutzaim later in Prakim. Because each one, remember, the whole key thing is how do you reconcile Gvul and Bli Gvul? So Gvul has to be stretched to the farthest it can go and stick Bli Gvul into it. And Bli Gvul has to be stretched the other way and stick Gvul into it, so to speak. And the more you, and now, so what do you need all the pages for? Why don't you just say that on one page? Because the Rebbe Rashab isn't just being academic. He's teaching us how to do it. And Gvul is, let's put it this way, we all know, is not an easy thing to deal with.
We had a little problem understanding Mati v'lo Mati.
So I saw some of the exchange, the difference between wave and particle, I heard. I don't know if you want to go into that, because the previous page, we could talk about it afterwards. Let's learn this page. Because really, it's negay, but it's not as negay. The bottom line is that Ak has the idea of Zman in a form of Mati, it was Mati Mati, as opposed to Seder Zman that comes later, right? That's the key. You have to remember, if Zman is Kedima v'yichur, before and after, Mati Mati is more like two Tnuas. It doesn't yet have a shape of before and after. That's what it comes as. This is what he says. Etzem and Ishpashtus, Kibbutz Ishpashtus, right? Yeah. I don't know if I just agree that it's wave and particle, something to talk about, because But it's an interesting parallel.
It's a mushel anyway. It's not.
No.
Just we're keeping you in check. You
So
know.
let's go back.
Before you make your scientific statements, you're gonna have to verify them.
So the bottom line is why you need.
You think you can just say whatever you want and nobody can contradict you, know?
No, I'll tell you why. Because wave and particle, I once wrote about is I think more the two shittas and edis, whether it's edis mitziyadim or edis pshutim. That fits very because mitziyadim is particles and pshutim is more like wave. But doesn't mean it's not. It's something to be done. So bottom line is like this: that the challenge that we have is it's all nice and good theoretically.
What's interesting about it is because the Rebbe Shab talks about it here within Zman. Within Zman.
But that's always that mati is the shadish of the two tenuas that made it be Kadmon and Ichur.
Okay.
Or Hever Nashid.
Yeah,
Right. In some involved, there's much more tichus about it. He refers to it.
For the sake of clarity, when you said Atzilus is higher than Ak in this context,
Atzilus the close.
you meant Atzilus the close, not the Atzilus that we usually talk about.
Right, exactly. Because Atzilus, what we usually talk about is Asiya the close. Yeah, that's critical.
Spread it out for me.
No, that's critical. That's
For
critical.
sure.
Yeah, that's constant. You have to always hold cup like that. You're talking about Atzilus the close. You're talking about Eir Lifnei.
Which we don't usually talk about. We almost never mean that when we say Atzilus generally.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because when we speak Atzilus the pratis, you're really referring to the same idea.
Right.
And then Bria is like Ak, but Bria pratis is not Ak. That's the bottom line. That there's no such thing as Ak the pratis, basically. So So bottom line is like this: the challenge is, and this is why it takes so much learning, is someone will say very nice, Gvul and Bligvul can meet in Indian, but how do we do it? You and I, we live in a Gvuldika world. We feel there's constant parameters. Everywhere we go, we bump our head into another Agbola. So where do you see Bligvul? So it's critical. The Naveda of it is much harder than the Haskalah of it, obviously. So now he's going to go over now how Tada has these two elements that Ak has. That in other words, Tada is this mamutza of Ak, and Tada has klal and prat. That's what he's going to say in this Pedic, basically. That's the Nakuda here.
So the way for me to touch
So everything he learned till now, all the prakim till now, was leading up to how Tada now serves the purpose of. Listen, Ak is the concept, but Tada serves the implementation of this klal and prat thing, and he's going to speak how Tada has both things.
So the only way for me to touch this infinite to go beyond my parameter is by learning Tada.
And doing mitzvahs, ultimately, yeah. Because Tada mitzvahs is ultimately the ultimate mamutza. See, mitzvahs is going to talk about later. Mitzvahs is like kalim. We're not talking about kalim now, it's all eir. But ultimately, yeah, because that's divine. It has to ultimately be something that's not human. Because if you do something human, you can only go as far as a human can go. That's the whole thing. That's why you need something divine. Ultimately, that's why the Eibishter gave Tada and mitzvahs. But it's not so simple, because Tada mitzvah is still more divine than it is human. So the question is, how do you fit into the human? So that's why it's the back and forth. Ak is explaining how the Hisabos took place. See, why is it critical the Eibishter had a vision and then went down? By us, we need it. Human beings can't. How could you create something without a vision? Because if the Eibishter didn't have a vision, we'd have no way to get there. It would be a disconnect. We spoke about this. If it went straight from Atzmos, or straight from Bligvul into this dining room here, there's no way back, and also no seichel way that it came here. There's no way to relate to it. So Ak is the. What he's going to say now basically is he's going back. Kutsha brichus takel baraisa or bara almas. Kutsha brichus is higher than Ak. He looks into Araisa into Ak, in the klal, in the vision, and with that he creates the world as we know it. That's really what he's going to basically say now. And he's going to touch this in Tada de Kresis.
And your question is, how is it stakel? How is Banash learning Torah Mekayim Alma?
That comes afterward. But first, let's talk how the process starts from the architect's perspective, so to speak. So that's really what it is. I mean, it's beautiful. First of all, it's a take on Tada that we're going to learn now. No one talks about Tada that way. The most you talk about Tada is divine wisdom, but you don't see when you talk about blueprint, mamash a blueprint. It's with Eibishter put his vision down on paper, so to speak, for the first time. He committed the vision to some type of to some communication. I mean, Ak is still a klal. It's hard to relate to on the vision level, but that's what it is. So it says Vayemer Elokim Yehi What's Vayemer Elokim? That he looked into the Tada, saw that it said Eir. That means he looked in Ak and saw that I have in my vision the concept. Then he said, you know what? Now we create Eir. Same thing with Rekiya and the third day, etc. So let's learn. Valpizeh Yuvan, bottom of.
We're in the creation. Does it say created Ak? Is there anything that you can relate to that? When God created Ak, Is it in some
I understand what you mean. Yeah. Tada is the best. Is the only real thing that we
That
have.
was before creation, so maybe.
No, you have, for
Ak
example,
was actually before creation. It's with Torah, so yeah.
Torah really precedes Ak. It's the real truth because you say, you're going to learn later, but Torah as a structure. Remember, Torah is a structure. It tells a story, has narrative, has details in it. So Tada is really Ak on paper, basically, if you want to put it that way. It's like walking Ak. I mean, a human being, when we say Zesa Tada Adam, when we, through our Veda, like a Markova, make ourselves like, if we lived exactly what Tada said, we would be a walking Ak also. Exactly, there we are. That's the whole. That's what a tzaddik ultimately is. It's the ultimate Adam.
By the way, in the previous Os, Ak ends up being the narrator of Torah. In the Pianal.
Third person.
In the Pianal, who is the Shlishi Medaber, Vedaber Shem Meshaleme? No, hey, this, Shlishi,
Yeah, he's going to say this now about Ichnas more. He's going to say this in detail here. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I know it's when there are sometimes you'll find that certain Giluyim, like you say, this was a Gilui of Atzilus. Moshe was in a Neshama Atzilus. You'll say sometimes, certain things. There are probably things that are a Gilui of Ak that happen once in a while in history. I know what you mean. You mean to say any event that we associate with Ak. Because usually you don't associate things more with Atzilus or with like you say Moshe when he spoke to Pari, it was Atzilus speaking to Klippa, so to speak. Ak is more the concept like what Baal Shem Tov says. Everything is even a blettel, even a leaf turns over. Or when he was able to look into the Tada and saw the oxen in Breslov, he came to the Baal Shem Tov because there's a sipur. They asked him how was he able to see? So he basically looked into Ak. It wasn't like a big thing. For him, once you look in Ak, what's the big thing? The problem is how do you get to look into Ak? The story with the Rebbe.
The web connection.
There was a Rebbe that used to be able to tell people they lost things, or they lost a brother or sister or somebody, they went where to find. So one chassid was like skeptical. He hid in the Rebbe's room, and not that chassid from that Rebbe, from another one. And he sees that when after the guy leaves and asks for the Rebbe gets up on a chair and looks like this. He can't believe it. He comes out of his hiding. He says, "What is that? Manavshach. If you could see, what do you have to get up on a chair?" He says, "You have to make a keli b'derech hatev."
Right.
Newspaper on the chair.
Okay. Apizeh yuvan mashikosav. So we're learning kufayim. Apizeh meaning according to everything we learned about Ak, that Ak has both elements to it. I see in the Agdomatir he said that Ak has one element that has primius Ak and chitzenius Ak. So one is like representing more the higher than the lower, but above all is Kal and Prat. That's the main emphasis in Ak. So he says, according to that, we'll understand what it says in the Zayad. Remember, he's referring now back to the Pedic. We started talking about the Zayad. What Pedic was that? Just to give you Kuf Samach Dalet.
I think no, it's probably earlier.
Even earlier, right? He starts it really in Kuf Samach Beis at the bottom. Staka Baraisa Bor Alma, the whole thing with Araisa, Chochma. But in Kuf Samach Dalet, he explains that Chochma is not just Atzilus, it's a Chochma of Ak. So we have both things in the Torah. So now he goes back to this. Ibn looks into Torah Bor Alma. Now here's the Dagis. Araisa hi b'chinas Chochma d'Ak. So Araisa is Chochma of Adam Kadmon. How do we know this? Okay, he said that earlier, right? Dalatei ksiv kashayemer Mushel Kadmoni. He already mentioned that earlier. Torah is called the primordial Mushel, the primordial metaphor. So if you say something is a metaphor, the ultimate metaphor is the Tada, the first of all metaphors. So it's an interesting expression. Why is it called Tada metaphor? And he's going to explain that now. Shehi Mushel the Ein Seif Kadmon Shalela. There you go. Tada is a Mushel. It's like a metaphor for Ein Seif Kadmon Shalela. That's why it's called Mushel HaKadmoni. Because it's a Mushel for the Eibishter, who's the first source, basically. How would you translate Kadmon Shalela? Not just the first, preceding the world, but it also means the earliest. Adam Kadmon, okay. So Tada is a Mushel for Ein Seif. The Kamoy HaMushel Hu Levush Al HaNimshul. So now what do we do when we dissect a Mushel? What's a Mushel exactly? A Mushel is like a garment. A Nimshul is the idea, and a Mushel is a metaphor or an example you use to explain the idea. So just like a Mushel is a Levush Al HaNimshul, Kamoy Kem B'chinas Chochma D'Ak, Hu B'chinas Levush L'Eidin Sei Baruch Hu. So which is Tada. So just like a Mushel explains something which you can't understand on its own, you need an example. So Chachma Da'ak is a type of Mamutza Mamashal that is a levush, a garment to explain Eid and Sev Baruch Hu. Umashanikra b'shem Mushel hu lehedes the Eid and Sev hamislabish b'Chachma Da'ak ein zerak ha'ara levad. So when you say it's a Mushel, it's to point out, to emphasize that it's not just ha'ara, a reflection. So this is a key difference between a reflection and an example. He's going to say a reflection is not the thing itself, because it's just a reflection of something, like a reflection in a mirror. A mushel is the thing itself. It's only explained in different oases, in different words. Ki'im hu b'chinas eir atzmi. A mushel is eir atzmi. A mushel is the thing, except on a lower level. Ha'ara is just a reflection of the thing. That's what he says here.
And that's Gevul. This is Gevul you're talking? With this Schachma, Avak is Gevul. Explain like this. Doesn't seem like Gevul to me.
Well, one second. When you say the Eibishter created the world in 6 days, is that Gvul?
Yeah.
So it's just but yeah, the Tada is Gvul. But he ate it. It could be a unbelievable type of Gvul. Remember, Bli Gvul doesn't have tzir. When you say Bli Gvul, remember, let's go back to the Kav and when he spoke Atzilus. Atzilus doesn't have a shape and form. Let's talk practically. If there was only Atzilus and no Ak, we would have a existence made of light. Like almost no, you wouldn't see differences. You'd say in there is some differences somewhere, but it's in a form of complete light, and therefore.
The Chachma we even learned that a few
But
weeks ago.
but remember that
was always believable. We learned that in every level this Chachma which is believable.
Yeah, but you have to look. You have to remember, Chachma is a mamutza. Chachma is not Bli Gvul alone. Chachma is how Bli Gvul comes into Gvul. So, but one second. But let me say this. Remember, there was that whole parak where he learned the chiddush of the Arizal with the Tzimtzum. You'll see why it's so vital. Ak is after the Tzimtzum. Let's get that very clear. Atzilus is not, and Kav is not. Light is not after the Tzimtzum. If there was no Tzimtzum, huh?
Kav is.
Yeah. But the Kav is Shadish. It's Shadish is from the light before the Tzimtzum.
Start.
Yeah, right. So one second. So what's the point? Why was the Tzimtzum so negay? Remember, you said that without the Tzimtzum, everything's ill of all. So we have a big problem. Because you can't be in touch with Ein Sof can never evolve into becoming Gvul. The Tzimtzum creates the quantum leap, so to speak, the black hole where there's absolute silence or absolute emptiness, so to speak, and then you can begin Ak. And even then, Ak is still a klal that's so amorphous and so unshaped, but it's definitely the beginning of existence as we know it. Think of existence like I'll give you a perfect example. I have an excellent example. I mean, it doesn't use it, but what just came to mind. Once an egg is fertilized and conceived, the first second, how big is it? It's less. It's like a strand. What do they say? How's the size? It's not even the size of, I think, like a strand of a hair. That's that small. You look at it, you'd never know that it's anything. That it's going to become a human being with all the complexities and neurosis and needing therapy and all that. You can't imagine. Or a seed, but it's after the Tzimtzum already. It's already a conception, and you can't understand how it's going to turn into a whole existence. But think of now the universe as a whole, all of us in a seed. I'm not saying it's mamish like that because Ak is probably not even a seed because it doesn't even have that type of shape. But whereas Kav is light. Kav is the divine saying, I want to create a universe of Gvul. Shir Atzmi B'Keach. Remember, that's a whole different picture. It's saying, Ein Sof, the Eibishter in his existence, however we imagine it, said, I want to have a world. I want to have a seed like that. But there's no seed yet. There can't be an existence of a seed in the light because the light is so enormous and so all-encompassing. Like it says, it submerges everything. Nothing can take shape. The seed cannot emerge without its Tzimtzum, basically. So, according to the Pardes or the other Mukabalim, they have a big problem because how do you get from the seed to the Ein Sof? It's all illival. So you're not really going to the Ein Sof. You have to say that it's not really Atzmos. Kesses is not really Ein Sof, that whole problem. But once the Arizal says there's the big jump, then okay. So the Eibishter in his mind wanted to have a universe of Gvul. If you go into that mind, there's no Gvul at all. There's no seed, there's no nothing. There's just, the Eibishter in his is determined he wants existence as we know it. That's really the Kav, the Eir HaGvul. It's Eir, it's not Kalim, and definitely not the seed. Ak is really the beginning of Kalim and the beginning of the seed. That's the key distinction. So yes, if you ask me, compared to the worlds after Ak, the seed is blig vul in a way. But it's not. It's the cloud. It has a taste of it. Remember, the seed, we still have to learn how the seed is connected to the light before the tzimtzum. And he's saying here that it does have it has a taste of Ein Sof, the Pnimius Ak, there is that. But the real Yesod of Ak is, that's why he went through the whole dissecting of Muzman and Mokum. Everything has space and time are all limited. In Ak, you have the klal, the so-called all-encompassing vision, the klal of the prat. But a klal is an existence. This is a key difference. Does it compute?
A little bit. Not too much, a little.
The bottom line is, you can't just talk about blig vul in sweeping terms. And I remember one of the first things I heard when I Bacher, and it really blew my mind, because I realized that blig vul is not just, us we use it as a infinite or it's finite. It's not so simple. So Rabbi said it. He was said in the name of Mushel, who heard it from the Rebbe Rashab, or from the Mashpim of the Rebbe Rashab. You don't really see it in Chassidus, but he speaks, for example, the example he says there, you have the expression often in Chassidus, it says, Yesher Mishainarech Atzilus Lagabe Biyah is Einarech Atzilus Lagabe Ein Sof.
You said it over here also.
Yeah.
Same.
So the question is, what means Yesher? Is blig vul and gvul, like we spoke about, numbers, as far as you go, numbers can never reach blig vul. So how could you talk about, how can you talk levels in Ein Sof, so to speak? So the example they gave, as I said, goes back, is unbelievable example. Here's the example. Like they used to say also about by Chassidim, they said that the Rabbi Hillel Parashah would say that as far as I am from a cat, me and the cat are equal to Gabi the Rebbe. So again, you have a certain levels. So they explained it like this. Take a set of numbers. You have finite numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4 billions. All of them are finite, clearly. And they're equally distant from infinite. Proof being that no matter how many numbers you add up, it doesn't suddenly hit infinite. It doesn't. So infinite is another set of numbers. It's called the infinite set of numbers. So these two are definitely Shalei Berach, because one doesn't add up to the other. But if you asked infinity, are the numbers Tefes Makim? Do they have any value? So infinity will say, they have no value compared to me because I'm infinite, but they're numbers. We're both in the world of numbers. Imagine now you ask an entity that doesn't even recognize numbers as being an entity. That would be like a lukus. Numbers don't even exist. So it's not just that the finite number doesn't have what infinite has. Even what you are is also worthless. Infinity can't say that a number doesn't exist. It could say it exists, but it's completely...
Infinity in terms of numbers. When you say infinity by numbers, you don't mean infinity in general.
Exactly.
What is infinity of numbers? I have no idea.
I mean, numbers...
There's such a thing called a set of infinities. Infinite
numbers?
Yeah. It's called this...
Imagine believable numbers.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
It doesn't matter. There's such an existence in mathematical equations. The point is that the weakness of the finite number is not what it is. It's what it's missing. It's not infinite. But what it is, you can't say is what it has. They're both in the world of numbers. Whereas from real Ein Sof, there even what it is meaningless. You understand? So you could have, for example, a gadol, a big, a high neshama. So he could say this: all other neshamas are equal compared to that neshama. He's so big. But Moshe Rabbeinu can't say that a human being is not a human being, because he's also a human being. He's just the highest type. And yes, Shalei Berach, you'll never reach. You can never reach, but you cannot say that what you are doesn't have any value. But then there's a level of Ein Sof that even what you are is meaningless. Who says that Adam has value altogether?
Okay,
That's a type
put
of...
it in simple terms. So let's say a person thinks
That's what Hill Parker said.
that we are Chachamim. I'm a Chacham.
Philibus Me'iz is
And the
Eichnish.
genius is a Chacham 1,000.
That's amazing.
And the Eibishter is the
amazing
super Chacham, who is a bligvul Chacham that the smallest Chacham to the greatest possible Chacham of Atzilus is equally distant because he's infinity Chacham. Infinity Chacham. At the end of the day, Chacham is a value.
Correct.
So he's infinitely a Chacham, bligvul, literally bligvul, but Chachma is a value. Now go take it, let's say if you're a monkey.
Yeah.
With the Chachma, B'chlal not Tefes Makim. In other words, go from the other side. Chachma, the monkey, it's a different gather. In other words, you're still thinking of the Eibush as a bligvul Chachma because Chachma is a value by you. Bli gvul means where chachma or zman or makayim or any other is all equal also. The eicha, so to speak.
There's an expression which he's going to use. If he didn't use it yet, I don't remember. Remind me. Ein sof b'hashala. Did you have an expression like that?
No.
In Samach Vav, he's used it in Hachedish, and also he's going to use it here later. Ein sof b'hashala means, how do you say b'hashala? Shema Mushel. It's Ein sof, but it's borrowed Ein sof. It's not mamash Ein sof. For example, he gives an example. Mayim, a sea. It's called Mayim she'en lahem sof. It's a halacha about
That's
it.
gvul.
Hold on. No, but I'm telling you, he calls it Ein sof b'hashala. 1 second, let me finish here.
Comparatively.
Yeah. So what does he say? For example, there's a din. It's a din halacha. If by Guna, if a man gets lost in the water, if it's a sea, not just a lake, it's considered as if he's dead, because it means lost at sea means why? Because the yam is called mayim she'en lahem sof. So the question is, of course, it's what do you mean ein lahem sof? It's made up of drops of water. It's made up of drops at the end of the day. And it's a yam. You can't imagine how many drops. But there was a guy in one of the Tanoim said that he can, if you give him this, he can calculate how many drops are in the sea.
Yeah, you can.
But it's still called Ein Sof B'Hashala because it has an element of Ein Sof, because at least in our language, it's like endless. It's endless. This is not the same as exactly as I said, because this is Mamish Gvul. It's a very big Gvul. But you still call it Ein Sof B'Hashala because it has an element. Ak is the vision, the cloud of all of existence, but nothing more. So Ak cannot say, in other words, if we had now the Gili of Ak, we would be bottled, but we wouldn't be annihilated. Because Ak, we are Tefes Makim. The vision recognized, the Klal recognized, in the Klal al Masha B'Prat. If there's no Prat, there's no Klal. In other words, the Ak has to recognize us as individuals. But if you were Gili of Eidin Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum, like he says in Tanya, if you were able to see for a second, we would cease to exist. Because even our being has no value. Our being has no value on that level. That's the bottom line. There's two different bittul. Now we need both. Why do we need both? Because one is a bittul that represents a lakus, to show you what the ultimate bittul is. The second bittul of Ak is a bittul that's within our gdarim still. So the real challenge is going to be, which he's not yet up to, is how do you combine the two? Can we have a bittul of Eidin Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum and still remain in existence? And that's where it's going to get complicated, because that's where Ak meets Ein Sof. So the bottom line is, when you expand this says clearly in Samach Vav. He probably says it here later too. When he says the vart is that after the tzimtzum we're like a student, that you now you can contain the air, and the air starts building and your kalim start expanding. At some point you can contain even the air before the tzimtzum, on your terms. You couldn't contain it earlier, and then you can contain. He says even an air chadash that is even before the lifnei tzimtzum. So in truth is, once we are able to, let's call this assimilate or contain Ak, from Ak we will be able to go to the Kav and even higher. That's ultimately the goal. That's the Asad Lovi. That's the ultimate Gvul and Bli Gvul union. Like that's Odom Eina Min Amida in our lives.
And that can happen only because of that sin.
Yeah, but you can't get there without going through the steps. So that's the bottom line. There's no way to get there without all this. So Ak is bringing it down more to our level. And remember, Ak is also, there's going to be Akudim, and there's going to be Atzilas, there's going to be Kes. I mean, there's plenty of steps. So if you really want to look at the picture, what you're talking about is Eidin Sof we're not addressing right now. Eidin Sof is not on our level. We don't exist in that place. But Ak, at least there's some connection. That's the Klal and Prat. And that's what Tada does. So when a person learns Tada, not just human intellect, they're beginning to get a taste of what's called Chachma Ak, essentially. So that's what he says here. Mashanikra b'shem Mushel who later days, okay. U'kamei ha-Mushel, shemahus ha-Mushel mislabish boy. Like by a Mushel, it's not ha'ara, just a reflection. The mahus ha-Nimshel, rather. The mahus of the Nimshel, of the idea, is actually there in the Mushel, in the example. Rak shemesalim b'teiche, it's only concealed there. Av mokom mokom hu mahus ha-Nimshel. So like I just gave an example, for example, with the seed. Let's say the Mushel is a Mushel Mechuvah. That Mushel contains the whole idea. It's not just some reflection. It's the idea, except in a language that we can relate to more. Or any real Mushel is like that. So a Mushel conceals, but it's a levush. It's like when you put on a garment. It's not the garment is not. When I see you in garments, doesn't mean I see a reflection of you. I see you, but you're dressed up. A reflection would be if I saw you in the mirror, or I saw a picture of you. But it's not. But a levush doesn't mean it's still you, except you're dressed in a garment. Da pasach el yo, a hefer ben simsim leparsa. Give me an example to explain the difference between ha'ara, a reflection, and a mushel. The tzimtzum ubchinas sila ka'er. A tzimtzum is sila ka'er. The air is removed. Since tzimtzum removes the light, so any light that you see afterwards is a reflection, not the original light. Aval parsa was more like a curtain. Think of tzimtzum as like you push it, sucking out the light from an area. Parsa, you're just concealing the light. You're like putting on a shade, or you're putting on sunglasses. You see sunglasses, you see the sun, except it's through sunglasses. So parsa hu shemahusa eir misalam boy. Parsa is that the mahusa eir is hidden within it. U'kamoy hamoshel shemahusa nimshel mislabish. And that's like a mushel. Like this is when all in Tada air. That the parsa is like a mushel. Tzimtzum is not like a parsa. It's not like a mushel. So when we see the light after the tzimtzum, it's a reflection of what was there. Whereas when with the light through a curtain or through a veil, is the same light except it's concealed, like sunglasses or like a mushel. So all this is coming to explain Mushel HaKadmeni, that the Tada is Mushel HaKadmeni, which is Chochma Da'ak, that in it has Atzmus Ein Sof. I know you're going to back to your question. No, but you understand, but the seed is a seed that comes from God, you have to remember. It's a creation of God, so of course it has what God wants in it. But it's not God now, it's now a seed. It's now a Bria, it's a Nivra. I mean, let me ask you a question. How do you difference between a Nivra and a Netzel? Something that's a Netzel and something that's a Nivra. What makes something a Nivra? Everything comes from God.
There's a difference?
Of course there's a difference.
Creation and an emanation.
Yeah, of course there's a difference.
Nivra and a Netzel.
Yeah, of course there's a difference. I mean, he's saying here even more than that. Of course, what's the difference between Eir and Kelim? Eir is Datzilos and Kelim Datzilos. They're both from the Elikus. We're not talking about Kelim in our kitchen. It's Kelim of Elikus. The difference is that a Keli is not Dovuk. It does not reflect the divine personality, so to speak. And Eir does. Ak is a seed. It reflects what God wants to create, but it doesn't reflect godliness. That's what he's saying. That's basically the difference between a Nivra and a Netzel. So, of course, the Nivra also can't exist without godliness giving it chayas all the time. But it's something that is so-called, I created it, not me. I mean, there's examples for it in ourselves. How you speak to your children, or to someone very close to you, reflects your feelings. When you're at work, you may be building a machine. Yeah, doesn't someone look at the machine and say it reflects who you are? You say, no, I just do this as a job. I build automobiles, for example. Does it have your ingenuity in it? Yeah. Does it have some of your personality? Yes. But it's not. You can't say it's an extension of me. When I'm with my children, when I'm with my family, I'm expressing an extension of myself. I mean, you can have a lot of examples of this. It's a difference between when you create something, you invest in it, part of you, but you can't call that a reflection of you. I mean, I can go on with so many examples. It's not really this is really relevant to all of Chassidus. It comes down to what is the definition of a nivra. You say God creates something as opposed to something that's an extension of the divine. Now remember, I'm not even getting into that the Yesh has something about Atzmus that the Eir doesn't have. That's another story. But it's definitely in a form of nivdal. It's a form of nivdal. Basically, let's talk about pantheism. So Spinoza pantheism. He said the world is God and God is the universe. God is nature and nature is God. Where is he wrong? The nature is God is fine. But not that God is nature. That's the key. You understand? So nature is a nivra.
But God is nature also.
No, but to say no, but you can't say equals. You can say that and more.
Much more.
Yeah. Yeah. You say God is alts and alts is God. There's an expression like that. Yeah. But you don't say alts equals God and that's it. So Mamala Kalamin really is really
He said that's it?
Yeah, for sure. That was the key.
What is it? There should be something beyond that.
Remember, there's no bittul then. because then I am God. Ultimately, my Ratzon is mine.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what's the
In
problem.
Apichsidus, it's only Mamala Kalaman, really. What you're missing is you're missing the bittul to something beyond you. Then I'm God. You and I, whatever we decide, nature is God. You don't have to subjugate yourself to another Ratzon outside of you. That's what it comes out. But Dakas Misnagdim feel the same way. I don't mean Misnagdim, let me just, for the record, when I say Misnagdim, I mean that it's Misnagdim within us. What do I mean by that?
That's politically correct.
Yeah. But I mean to say, what does it mean? It means that God is on your terms. As soon as God is on your terms, you got yourself problems. As soon as you say that I don't know anything about God beyond me, then you have a God that's in your image instead of God creating you in His image. That's the key. So if you want nivroim, that's a nivra, nature. Now you'll say to me, 1 second, nature is not a lukus. Of course it is. Every part of nature reflects God's mind, but that's not Atzilus. That's not a reflection of God. That's how God created something and invested in it. He's there. Now we know that within Elikim, Havayu Elikim, we can find in nature even that which is beyond nature. We know that. But when you look at nature alone, nature on its own is a reflection of God's creation. It's God's creation. That's the key difference, and that has to come after a tzimtzum. Because if there's no tzimtzum, you go back to the problem with the Ramak. It's ill of old. Then again, there's no similarity. The bottom line is this universe can be completely divine, but you can't call this as a reflection of the entire God. You used to have the expression that the Ikar of Elikus is not that He created. You can't even call God a creator ultimately, because even that is really not a definition of who He really is. That's what's missing in all of that. That's why you need. Remember, let's not forget, intermediary has to represent both sides equally. If you want real shalom bayis, you need to have a representative of God and a representative of us. We're gvul, no question, and God is not extension of us. So Eir is the critical ultimate. Eir is the ultimate chiddush of Chassidus Chabad. That's what he says in some of Vayelach. Because Eir is the ultimate representation of God. It's bottled completely to Him, but it's on our terms, because Eir is a Metzias. But it's a Metzias that's completely connected to God. So Eir can reflect godliness. We cannot. So we have our representative, we have God's representative, and it comes together. I don't mean to put it that way. It's not, because it's not separate entities. It ultimately is all divine. But we're talking about, again, climbing the ladder and reconnecting. So here he's talking how. So Ak is the first step of Bria. Bria the Kolos. That's why Ak is Odem. Ak is the parts of it is called Odem. It's called Bria. It's a klal. It has everything in it. The seed is, I think, a good example. For our purposes. He doesn't use it here, but I recall that he may use such an example somewhere. Okay. So, 1 second. But it's a Mushel. Let's not forget that. It's not the Nimshel. It's a Mushel. That's a key thing here. It's an example for Ein Seif. For V'zehu Kutchabrichu Stakabaraisu the Kutchabrichu. This is what it means. The Kutchabrichu looks into Tada. Now he goes through the levels. The Kutchabrichu b'chinas atzmus ein sof. B'chinas kedugmas atik shalamayla maylam b'chinas aklal da'ak. Here we go. Kutchabrichu is referring to a level of the divine. Which level? It's really like Pnimiyasak. The level of atik that's like Ka'ain, Reisha the Galgalta, that's higher than Ak. Remember, said the end of the Lifnei Tzimtzum where the Kav begins it's like the Kesed of Ak, the Atik of Ak. You remember that level?
Yeah,
the level is basically it's Malchus the Ein Seif becomes the Atik. In Eitz Chaim he says there's a Ka'ain, just like there's an Atik in Atzilus the Pratis. There's an Atik in Atzilus. Kedugmas Atik. So that's Kutchabrichu. So that's not Ak, it's higher. He says Shalamayla Mayla b'chinas aklal da'ak. For who? That level is Takel Baraisa. That level looks into Tada. What is Tada? Shehu b'chinas Ak, Eir Klali. So Kutchabricha Atik, that's higher than Ak, looks into Ak, which is the Eir Klali, the all-encompassing light, energy. By Yedezeh Bara Alma. And through that he creates the world. And now to explain this, because he's saying he looks into Tada, he's going to say now that in Tada there's also a Klal and Prat. Continue. Ve'inyan hu di'inigam b'teira yesh b'chinas klal prat. In a Raisa, in this Tada, the Eibishter Kutchabrichu looks into that creates the world is also klal prat, which makes it therefore similar to Ak. That it call haparsha shebetera harehu harehem api adibur dafke. The whole Tada was said api adibur api the words of the Eibishter. Kumeshikosa b'chol parsha vaydaber Hashem al Meisha. He's going to give you a beautiful explanation of the words vaydaber Hashem al Meisha lemer daber al bnei Yisrael daber Hashem al Meisha daber al bnei Yisrael lemer. Every word he's going to tie trace through the whole Stalshlus, which really explains that Tada is really a dynamic going on. Is that Ein Sof, the Atik, is consistently communicating through Ak and creating the world through all these levels. That's what he's going to say right now.
Which intertwines Eir and Tada, like you were saying.
Yeah, Eir and Tada and Klal and Prat and Aleph and Aleph. Yeah. So here's how it works. Vaydaber Hashem, you see constantly in the Tada, why does it say all these times Vaydaber Hashem al Meisha? Which also answers that question. Why do we have again and again? How many times do you have to know? The Eibishter said to Meisha. She says, V'hadibur hu b'chinas prat. When Vaydaber Hashem is already the prat. What's the prat? Because dibur, kidur b'inyan machshava dibur, the machshava klal v'dibur prat. When you say thought and speech is always prat l'gabe thought. U'protei hadibur d'teiru ha'amshacha protei b'esel sfiras d'atzilis. And all the different diburim, all the different words and ideas uttered in the Tada is the hamshacha pratis that comes down into Atzilus. V'zeu shabarei v'pashas never vaydaber Hashem al Meisha daber b'nei Yisrael lemer. Now he's going to touch the pasuk. This is the meaning that in Reiv Parshas, in most Parshas in the Tada, Reiv Parshas, it says this pasuk vaydaber Hashem al Meisha. Hashem spoke to Meisha, speak to the Eden and say to them. Every word here is a critical component in this whole picture. He's going to be dissecting it. Vayidaber hu lashon hanhogev hamshacha k'mo yidaber amim.
Yad v'ramim.
Yeah, Yad v'ramim. The Vayidaber when you say Vayidaber means to speak, but it also comes from the word hanhogev hamshacha, to anführen und zu mamshel sein, to lead and to transmit. Yad v'ramim. What's the context? Yad v'ramim. What's the pasuk say there?
He leads nations.
He leads nations. Okay. So you see, Dibur is more than just speaking. Dibur is running the show. Running, leading. Hamshacha. Havaya, the second word. So each word is being dissected. Vayidaber is anogav hamshacha. Havaya hu chochma datzilis. Hakel esus vidas datzilis. So we have here Vayidaber. Havaya means Havaya chochma datzilis that encompasses all 10 spheres. Ukumashakosav Havaya b'chochma. So we know from there that Havaya means Chochmah. We say Vayidaber Havaya. The Ikar Shem Havaya b'Chochmah. This is still God as He manifests in names. I know, I see you smile. And remember, there's a place.
Every time he goes, like that, there's a meaning to it.
No.
He's not just burping.
I'm very impressed because when we started learning Chassidus and we started saying, Havaya, what's Havaya? So Achnechi is the place to be. And what's Achnechi? Atzmus. That has no name, you know? Now I'm impressed because when he says Havaya, it's a shame I'm a fetish that you go into Beis HaMikdash with, you know, Kedesh Kadash. Remember, all this, we're not even by Atzilus. Atzilus is a Rebbe's Atzilus. And this is even higher than that. Understand? So you're right, but it's just, he's going into higher levels. What can I say? Hope it's not spoiling the sanctity of it.
We're talking about seal the practice.
Yeah, the pashtus. Yeah, please. So here, the Ikar Shem Havaya hu b'chochmah. That Atzilus b'chlal hu Shem Havaya.
Atzilus b'chlal.
Yeah, and all the spheres of Atzilus are Nichl and Chochmah. It's a theme that he says many times in the Ayin Beis. I see constantly. Chochmah is always. Remember, it says Abba Mekana b'Atzilus, Din is Mekana. So all the spheres, if b'chlal Atzilus is Chochmah of the picture, of the whole picture. But in Pratis it has 10 spheres in it. So it's always, you have to always constantly think like that. He doesn't let you get comfortable with any level. Every level is the Chabal level. That's Atzilus b'chal Shem Havaya. There's no difference between Atzilus l'biyad, Atzilus Shem Havaya, or biyad Shem Adnei v'Shem Elikim. So Atzilus b'chal is Shem Havaya. Remember, it's all explaining Vayidaber Havaya. He's going to Vayidaber Havaya. And Atzilus Gufa, Shem Havaya hu b'chochmah. And Atzilus Gufa, Shem Havaya is a chochmah, p'nei shechochmah kelelos kol esos spheres. That's the explanation. since Chachma is like the head, think of it this way, we go back to the seed. The head, it controls the whole body. So if the whole body is Atzilus, let's say, so Chachma is like the central nervous system that controls everything. So the Pratis, Chachma is the Havaya. That's really what it means. Okay. It says two things. Chachma kalelas koles spheres. Chachma includes all the compasses, all the 10 spheres, and all the hashpos of Atzilus come through Chachma, like the central nervous system. In a way, yeah. Al kein nikra Chachma shem Havaya, hainu shehi ikra Atzilus.
The two things that he said before. It's Kol Hakel and Mimenabar is Habus. The fact that everything of the system is in there doesn't necessarily mean that it's separate. That it controls this. It's great.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah. Okay, you see that probably added later because he's connecting it to a different point. Now he goes on. That's Vaydaber Havaya. So we covered it. So if you're making marks on it, so Vaydaber was covered. That's Hanogav Amshocha. Havaya is Chachma and Bechlolos Atzilus. And now El Moshe. What's Moshe? Vaydaber Hashem El Moshe. El Moshe Yesed Abba Atzilus. Now goes along the parentheses to the beginning, the top of the page of Shemem Hey. Okay, but we should read it because it's relevant. El Moshe Yesed Abba Atzilus. So what do we have here? Vaydaber. That the Hamshacha comes from Chachma Atzilus through Yesed Abba, through Moshe. So that's what all these levels are. Yesed Abba. What's Yesed Abba? This is what he's going to explain in the parentheses.
Through Chachma Atzilus, through Moshe, or
through Moshe? Yeah. Vaydaber Hashem El Moshe.
From Chachma Atzilus, it comes to Moshe.
Yeah.
Not it comes to Chachma Atzilus through Moshe.
No. Chachma Atzilus through Moshe comes to us, El Bnei Yisrael. My Bnei Yisrael will be the lower levels. Yesed Abba, remember, is Yesed of Chachma. Abba is Chachma. So he's going to explain what's the addition of Yesed in Chachma over Chachma itself. In other words, Moshe is also, but Moshe is what he's basically going to say is that Moshe is the mamutza, like the conduit of Chachma to lower levels. So that's why Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe. So we'll go through. I'll read this with Hashpah M'chinas Yesod. Remember, because now we need Hashpah. Chachma Atzilus itself is not Hashpah yet. It's just the first expression. The Yishpah comes through Moshe, because it's not Vaydaber Hashem el Bnei Yisrael. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe, Daber el Bnei Yisrael. So Moshe here is basically explaining Moshe's role in the process. So what's the role? The role is Hashpah. The Ayin Hamshacha b'Shem Havaya el Moshe. Ayin Hamshacha b'Shem Havaya el Moshe. The L'cheira ma'achad the Moshe b'chinas Yesed Abba imkei ma'u Hamshacha b'Chachma el Yisod.
They're both Chachma.
Exactly. And we are Shachem B'Shem Havaya El Moshe.
They're both Chachma Atzilus.
Correct. He's basically asking the question.
That's how he becomes Chachma Atzilus, by meeting.
Yeah, basically what's Tutuf Yesod, exactly.
He's asking
what is Yesod coming to add here? What is Moshe coming to add over Vaydaber Hashem? Basically. Because it's going through Moshe, El Moshe, yeah.
In other words, within Chachma Atzilus,
the wording here is a little. Needs because it goes Hashpah B'chinas Yesod. Fine. The Inyan Hamshach B'Shem Havaya El Moshe. This is all about. In other words, it's talking about the Hashpah, the Hamshach from Hashem Havaya to Moshe. The question is, what's Moshe's role here? L'cheira ma'achad Moshe B'chinas Yesod Abba imkei ma'u Hamshach b'Chachma Yesod. Since Hashem Havaya is being nimshach into Chachma, so what exactly is the role of Yesod Abba of Moshe?
The way I understand it is. Yesod Abba, what did we say? Moshe Yesod Abba Atzilus.
Right.
Yesod of Abba Atzilus, of Chachma Atzilus. In other words, Moshe is also in Chachma Atzilus.
Yes.
So within Chachma Atzilus itself, you have Chachma Atzilus coming into Yesod of Chachma Atzilus.
Right.
So you're both in Chachma Atzilus.
Exactly. So, yeah. Basically, he's going to get into now that there's two parts here. There's the Havaya is Chachma, and Moshe is Yesod of Chachma, and he's going to explain what this Yesod of Chachma is. Yeshleimer, din Yedua, do you say Shebeseichel? Most likely, I should just say this for the style of the Rebbe Rasha, most likely, and I would say there's probably 99%, the Lashon before the parentheses is taken from another Maimer, from the Alter Rebbe probably. So the Rebbe Rasha is really trying to explain what he means, because you take away the parentheses, and so on, it's like Vaydaber, Havaya El Moshe, Havaya, Vaydaber is Chochma, and then El Moshe, you say Abba, what does Yesod Abba coming to add? So he's really explaining probably a lotion that says somewhere. I'm almost sure that's what's going on here. Okay, so Yesh Leima, so this is the Rebbe Rashab explaining now. You do a Yesod Shebesechel Shashim B'chinas Kadmus HaSechel. So he's saying Yesod comes and adds a whole thing here. Yesod is not just a detail in Chachma. Yesod comes from Kadmus HaSechel. What's Kadmus HaSechel? As we'll see in a moment, Kadmus HaSechel is from the inner regions of Sechel, not just regular Sechel. It has to come from a deeper place than regular Sechel, because it's going to have to be Mashpiyah. Since it's going to have to be Mashpiyah, it's going to have to come from a deeper place. As you can explain, when you understand something on your own, it's one thing, but
Chachma Lein
Chachma Lein is not Mashpiyah.
Not Mashpiyah.
No, Chachma doesn't have.